The day I finally told him I loved him was supposed to be one of the happiest days of my life. Instead, it became the day everything changed. I still remember the way Daniel looked at me when I gathered the courage to confess. For a brief second, surprise flashed across his face. Then the warmth in his eyes disappeared, replaced by something I couldn't quite understand. "Claire," he said quietly, "you need to listen to me. No matter what happens, you'll always be like a little sister to me." Before I could respond, before I could even process the words, he turned around and walked away. Our friends stood nearby in uncomfortable silence while I remained frozen in place, feeling as though the ground had vanished beneath my feet. I never imagined that speaking to Daniel would someday become so difficult. After that night, he practically disappeared from my life. His parents had long since separated and spent most of their time living in different cities. They rarely visited the family estate anymore. The house that had once felt lively and full of warmth now seemed unbearably quiet. Apart from a handful of staff members, I was usually there alone. Weeks passed without a single glimpse of him. At first, I was devastated by the rejection. Yet, despite the pain, I couldn't bring myself to regret confessing. Daniel had been the center of my world for years. Growing up, I admired everything about him. While I was still in school, I kept my feelings hidden, convincing myself that I was too young. To him, I was always the little girl following him around, asking endless questions and demanding his attention. So I waited. I told myself that one day I would be older, wiser, and confident enough to stand beside him as an equal. That day had finally arrived. I was 21 years old and only weeks away from earning my university degree. I wasn't a child anymore. I believed I was ready for love and ready to tell him how I felt. Before confessing, I had imagined countless outcomes. In the most hopeful version, he would smile and admit that he felt the same way. We would begin a relationship, and everything I had dreamed about would finally become real. In the worst version, he would gently reject me and explain that his feelings were different. If that happened, I wanted honesty. I wanted a reason. I wanted to know whether there was any chance for us in the future. And if there wasn't, I would do my best to move on. It would hurt, of course. Loving someone for years doesn't simply disappear overnight. But I believed I could eventually heal. What I never expected was this. Not only had he rejected me, but he had also started avoiding me entirely. The realization came slowly. At first, I sent him a few messages. No reply. Then I called. No answer. I told myself he was busy. Daniel had always worked long hours, and sometimes business kept him occupied for days. But more calls went unanswered. More messages remained unread. An uneasy feeling settled in my chest. Finally, I asked the estate manager to contact him. To my surprise, Daniel answered immediately. Hope rushed through me as the phone was handed over. Daniel. The call ended before I could finish saying his name. I stared at the screen in disbelief. The next day, I contacted his executive assistant. "I'm sorry, Miss Claire," she said politely. "Mr. Carter isn't available, and I've been instructed not to disclose his location." The response felt rehearsed, like everyone had already been told what to say. Determined to find him, I reached out to several of his closest friends. Many of them had attended my birthday celebration. They had always treated me kindly. Now their voices sounded strangely distant. "Sorry, I haven't seen him lately. Wish I could help. I've got to run. Talk later." One after another, they ended the conversation. I wasn't trying to force Daniel into loving me. I wasn't even looking for another chance to confess. There was only one reason I wanted to find him. My graduation ceremony was approaching. Months earlier, he had promised he would be there. "I wouldn't miss one of your important milestones," he had told me with a smile. We had been scrolling through graduation photos online together. "These all look the same," he joked. "I'll hire a professional photographer. We'll make yours memorable." I laughed. "Then you have to be in some of the pictures too." "Deal," he replied. "I'll even wear something respectable for once." At the time, I had believed him without question. Daniel always kept his promises. Or at least, he used to. Unable to reach him, I eventually went to his company's headquarters. The receptionist recognized me immediately and welcomed me inside. I spent hours waiting in the executive lounge. Morning became afternoon. Afternoon became evening. Daniel never appeared. When I finally left, exhaustion weighed heavily on my shoulders. I had run out of options. Graduation day arrived sooner than I expected. I attended alone. Daniel wasn't there. The photographer he had promised to hire never arrived either. For a while, disappointment lingered in the back of my mind. Then my classmates pulled me into their celebrations. Laughter echoed across campus. Friends posed for pictures. Parents hugged their children. Professors offered congratulations. Slowly, I allowed myself to enjoy the day. My roommates and I took dozens of photos together. We laughed until our cheeks hurt and captured memories that would last a lifetime. By sunset, we joined the rest of our graduating class for a large group picture in front of the university gates. Looking at everyone around me, I realized I wasn't completely alone. After saying goodbye, I returned to the estate. The house was just as quiet as before. Daniel still hadn't come home. That evening, I selected my favorite graduation photos and uploaded them to social media. Within minutes, notifications began pouring in. Friends congratulated me. Former classmates left kind comments. Even distant relatives sent messages. But the one notification I secretly waited for never came. There was no message from Daniel. No like. No acknowledgement at all. The next morning, I walked downstairs expecting another lonely day. Instead, I stopped abruptly. Daniel was sitting in the living room. For a moment, I wondered if I was imagining him. Then relief flooded through me. Daniel. I hurried toward him. He looked up briefly. "I've been away on business," he said. That was all. A single sentence after weeks of silence. Dozens of questions rushed through my mind. Where had he been? Why hadn't he answered? Why had everyone refused to tell me anything? But I swallowed them all. Some answers are obvious even when no one says them aloud. He had been avoiding me. I forced a smile. "Well, I'm officially a graduate now." He nodded. "Congratulations." I tried to keep the conversation light. "You once promised I'd join Carter Holdings after graduation. Does that offer still exist?" Years earlier, Daniel had convinced me not to worry about job hunting. "Work with me instead," he had said. "At least I'll know you're being treated fairly." Back then, I had happily agreed. The idea of seeing him every day felt like a dream. Now, however, his response was different. "There's no rush," he said calmly. "Most graduates travel after university. Why don't you take some time off and see the world?" His words struck harder than I expected. He wasn't delaying because of business. He was sending me away. The message couldn't have been clearer. He didn't want me around. A painful knot formed in my throat. For weeks, I had tried to stay strong. Now my composure was beginning to crack. "Daniel," I said softly, "can I ask you something honestly?" He remained silent. "Why don't you like me?" The question escaped before I could stop it. I needed to know. For years, he had been patient, protective, and endlessly considerate. He remembered every important date. He noticed every small detail. Whenever I needed help, he was there. How was I supposed to believe none of it meant anything? His expression hardened. "I've already explained this." "No, you haven't. Your family, Claire. That's all. But we're not actually related." The words burst out of me before I could hold them back. For the first time, the silence between us felt heavier than anything either of us could say.